Hello, and thank you for joining me for this third reflection of 4 in a series on overcoming fear. When I was a kid, I was scared of grasshoppers. I hated their creepy mouths and their scratchy legs, and if it's August in southern Indiana, they are everywhere. My sisters and I played in the fields behind our house. And every time a big grasshopper would leap from a weed and land on me, I had to work really hard not to get hysterical while I frantically knocked it off. I didn't want my sisters to notice and make fun of me, which they would have. Grasshoppers didn't scare them at all. In fact, like most country kids, they like to grab one, hold it between their thumb and forefinger and tell it to spit tobacco. I have since learned that when the insect feels threatened, as it would being squeezed between those little fingers, it spits a brownish tobacco-colored liquid as a defense mechanism, a repellent for some creatures. But this creature certainly didn't need their spit to be repelled, and I could not understand why my sisters thought it was so fun to do something so gross. Well, once they discovered my fear, they decided to play a game called Let's Scare Luann with Grasshoppers. They'd catch one and chase me around with it. My family loves to tell the story of the time I got trapped in the bathroom after my mean little sister Martha shoved a grasshopper under the locked door. I stood on the bathtub pressed up against the wall while a big brown grasshopper sat on the floor eyeing me with its huge eyes, considering, I was sure, whether it wanted to launch an attack. Finally, my mother put a stop to the torture, though I imagine she was laughing inside. Excuse me. Of course, my fear was irrational. I knew grasshoppers couldn't really do anything to hurt me, but what my mind told me was far less important than what my body told me. They were creepy. In time, the fear went away, as most childhood fears do. But even though I love nature, grasshoppers can still make me squirm. It isn't unusual, of course, for children to have irrational fears. If asked, I'm sure you'd be able to immediately name a fear you had when you were a child. Maybe you were afraid of the dark or monsters under your bed or in the closet. It might have been clowns that scared you, or loud noises like thunder. Maurice Sendak was an author who wrote children's books, stories about the kinds of scary things that most kids fear: monsters, ghosts, being sucked down the bathtub drain. Sendak believed that though we tend to think of childhood as a happy, innocent stage of life, children experience the same scary emotions that we adults do: fear, anxiety, anger, frustration. But unlike adults, children have very little control over their lives. They don't know how to process their feelings. Sendak says, to master these forces, children turn to fantasy, that imagined world where disturbing emotional situations are solved to their satisfaction. Stories can help them to work through their fears safely, the best means they have of taming wild things and wild feelings. This is Sendak's most widely read book, Where the Wild Things Are. It's about a little boy named Max who dresses up in his wolf suit and creates havoc in his house. When his mother finally sends him to bed without dinner, Max sets sail for an imaginary island inhabited by monsters called the Wild Things. When they see him, they roar their terrible roars and gnash their terrible teeth and roll their terrible eyes and show their terrible claws. But when Max tells them to be still, they make him their king and share a celebration, a wild rumpus with him. Before Max's mother sends him to his room, she calls him a wild thing. clearly she has had enough of his mischief for one day, and he responds by yelling, "I'll eat you up." That was the last straw. It reminds me of an argument I once had with my own mother. She wasn't letting me have my way, so I yelled, "I hate you," something I had never done before. And all day while I was at school, I felt terrible. I was ashamed of my behavior, and I wasn't only afraid that I was going to be grounded for it. I was afraid that my mother's feelings were badly hurt. I was afraid that she might not be able to forgive me, that I might have damaged our relationship for a while. And though I couldn't really express it, I now know that deep down, I was afraid that she might stop loving me or love me less because of what I'd done. I had allowed my anger to control my behavior. Like Max, I had clearly crossed the line. I needed to know that I was forgiven and that my mother still loved me. Of course, when I tearfully apologized, she hugged me and we were fine. In Where the Wild Things Are, Max, having celebrated with the monstrous wild things, then realizes that he's tired of his wild behavior. He's lonely, and he wants to be where someone loves him best of all. He sails back to his room, where he finds that his mother has left dinner for him, and it's still hot. Children who hear this story can learn that even when they misbehave, even when their actions are wild and out of control, they are still lovable and still loved unconditionally, and that they don't have to be afraid, not of imaginary monsters, and not of becoming unlovable because of their bad behavior. Children learn to manage their fears through story. Fairy tales, books, stories that deal with the kinds of things that they may worry about but can't really articulate or manage on their own. Not so different from stories in this book, like the story of the prodigal found in the Gospel of Luke. You will recall that the son demands that his father give him his inheritance early. When he receives it, he leaves for a far country, where undisciplined and out of control he wastes everything he has been given. Did you know that the word prodigal means reckless and uncontrolled? In this story, as in Sendax, a son engages in reckless, mad, wild behavior, and like Max, eventually realizes that he wants to go home. The son is ashamed. He believes that he will have to humble himself before his father and beg his forgiveness. He certainly doesn't expect to be welcomed home. But before he even made it to the house, his father runs down the road to greet him with open arms. And the son's fear that he had destroyed their relationship is put to rest. His father's love has conquered his fear. The world can be a scary place for children and adults alike. As we grow, new fears take the place of old, some imagined and some quite real. And whatever our age, when we're frightened, we need to feel safe and secure. We need to feel loved. Last week, I talked with you about the two fundamental emotions, love and fear. And I shared the fact that love, particularly the perfect love of God, is the antidote for our fears. We need to feel loved. For love, especially the perfect love of God, will calm us. Remember 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. Last Sunday, Pastor Kim preached about the story of Jesus walking on the water towards a boat carrying his disciples. He invites Peter to join him, and Peter steps out of the boat. At first, he's fine. He's walking on the water towards Jesus. But then his focus shifts from Jesus to the wind and waves that threaten him. And he's afraid, so afraid that he doesn't trust that the same Jesus who led him to the water will save him from drowning. Peter begins to sink, and when he calls out for help, Jesus takes his hand. Peter's fear isn't irrational. Human beings can't walk on water. But the story teaches us that when we're afraid, God is ready to give us what we need to come through the other side of the fear. Compassion, forgiveness, courage, joy, hope. All we have to do is ask. Reading Bible stories like this one is one way that we can calm whatever fear we may be battling. Will it remove all of our fear? Probably not, but it will help, because we will know that we are not alone, like that the God who loves us so much is with us, giving us strength. I had decided that this week I was not going to talk about COVID. We have all heard more than enough about it. Something happened yesterday that caused me to change my mind. I was at my daughter Maggie's house, helping with the girls. A repairman came to the door to fix the dishwasher, and when he stepped inside, he wasn't wearing a mask. I gave him one and asked him to wear it, explaining that even though we'd be more than 6 feet away, we have a newborn, and we need to be especially careful. So he put it on. While he was working, we realized that we couldn't find Piper, our 3-year-old. She loves to hide, and she's very good at it. So I went from room to room calling her name, expecting her to jump out at any moment, giggling. I finally found her, curled up underneath their big coffee table, and she wouldn't come out until the repairman left. This is not like Piper. She's never been afraid of strangers. Shy, certainly, but not scared. I didn't know what to make of it, but her mother asked, "Were you afraid to come out because we asked the man to wear a mask?" And Piper tearfully answered, "Yes." Her parents don't watch or listen to the news, so she doesn't hear lots of scary things about the virus. I'm sure she's heard us talk about it, and she's seen people wearing masks. Her daddy is a registered nurse, so he's explained why wearing a mask is important, that he wears one every day at work, and he tells her that we do it to be heroes for other people, so they won't get sick. We had no idea that for her, a person in a mask is scary, because that mask means something bad might happen. This was all about her ability as a child to try to understand what's happening in her world. My husband Harry and I found it heartbreaking to think our little one could be so scared of the disease. But it's inevitable that it is affecting our children. I think it's hard for anyone to know how they are interpreting what they hear. The internet has lots of resources to help adults talk to their little ones about COVID-19. And of course, children who are of school age are learning about it. But as I think about what Sendak wrote about childhood, I realize that the world now holds a whole new set of fears that our kids have to process. Not grasshoppers or monsters or wild things, not imaginary, but quite real. And so as we're learning to adapt, to reshape our lives around what threatens our peace and well-being today, as we're working to keep our own fears at bay, let's also give thought to and prayers for the children. Let's teach them what we know about love and forgiveness and hope, and about Jesus, who is always with them in their fears, ready to reach out and take their little hands. Please join me in prayer. God, we know that even in our fear, you're here loving us. Thank you, and thank you for the people in our lives who also love us. People who will listen to us and will help us to feel safe. Dear Jesus, please be with the children of the world, many of whom are living with fears far beyond what we experience. Protect the hearts of our children. Help us to teach them to pray when they are frightened by things they can't understand. Let them know that they are loved beyond measure. We ask these things in your precious name. Amen. Thank you, friends. Be blessed and be well.